We're here at the... Where are we? We're here at the Singapore Grand Prix where Mark today, talking points are all about swearing again.
Yeah, it's a strange one that we spoke about swearing yesterday. It's carried on today. It's almost more serious today, isn't it?
Yeah.
That Max Verstappen, if you watched the video last night, if you're following what's been happening here, he swore during his press conference yesterday. Ben then asked him the question. It became a whole story after Autosport carried the FIA president talking about banning swearing on the radio and just in general. Max said that he was talking about his car in Baku, used the F word. He was actually hauled in front of the stewards today and given a, I think he's got to do basically the equivalent of F1 drivers' community service for what he did. He wasn't happy about it. I believe he just walked off when he was asked about it after FP2 this evening that's just finished here at the Marina Bay. But Ben, it's just some weirdly rumbled on, this story, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is strange. I mean, it's obviously something which the FIA president really is bothered about and wants to clamp down on in a similar way that he did that before with the jewellery, and he's really focused on it. And, you know, Max, as you mentioned, was called in front of the stewards, obviously given this penalty of sorts. You mentioned community service. That's probably a fair way to describe it. Yeah. It's reminding them about their responsibilities to younger listeners and not swearing in press conferences, which you've kind of got to say is probably correct. If we are mic'd up, you know, you wouldn't expect, you know, us to start swearing unnecessarily. So he argued that English wasn't his first language, which they actually rejected. So there's a lot of faculties to it, but ultimately, I think in the press conference environment, probably swearing isn't correct. But that said, I think when you're in the cockpit and you're risking your life every single time you get in the car, tracks behind us, but, you know, going around this circuit as fast as you can, obviously if you have a crash you're going to be frustrated, and I think that it's very much the DNA of sport to be frustrated when things like that happen and to vent. And I think that you know, it takes a special sort of person to be able to bite their tongue perhaps in those circumstances. And I don't really think that we should dial this out of sport. I think, you know, the big debate about whether, you know, young listeners are listening, well, that's up to F1 to decide on what they broadcast and what they bleep out. But to actually start actively banning and punishing drivers, not banning but punishing drivers for what they say, I think that's pretty harsh. Given the circumstances which they're racing under, incredibly hot here, so a tough track.
James Vowles, actually, to your point, just after the Verstappen punishment was announced, James Vowles was in the team principal press conference, and he kind of towed the line you said. He said, look, it's a bit different to swearing in a room like this where there's no pressure compared to, you know, these guys are elite athletes that are putting their lives not in their own hands but in the hands of the other drivers out there. So if something happens, you know, you're risking your life, you are going to swear.
Yeah.
He actually said that Franco Colapinto swore today during free practice 1, but that it was just because he'd forgotten something, and he said, look, we should be getting that out, that shouldn't be happening. But in the heat of the moment, you can't stop these, you know, these racers that are on the very edge. You know, it's emotion, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's emotion. I think that's what we connect with as fans. We want to see the emotion. You know, we want to see the characters. We can't see them with the helmet on, so we don't really get too much back, but obviously we can hear them. And I think it's been a good asset for Formula One. I think Formula One are quick as well when they say that, you know, they realise that when there's audio played of a sensitive nature, they're obviously aware of it, they'll bleep it out, but they do realise that it is an uptick in viewership, and people want to see that. And, you know, let's not take that away from the drivers. I think that would be a silly thing to do. What
will be interesting is Sunday when everyone's watching that race at home, or you know, we have the radio played into the press room. Will there be any bleeped out swearing? It'll be an interesting one, because driving around here, those drivers will be swearing and sweating and swearing. So it'll be interesting to see if the FIA follow what's been what the president's now said, or whether they go, actually, like you said, we want to add to the spectacle of the sport and show how hard this sport is. Let's move on a little bit, shall we? Or we got more on swear?
I was going to do a nice little segue into this, and that was the fact that when we were watching FP2 earlier on, the majority of radio that we heard was Max Verstappen being frustrated at his lack of pace in the Red Bull. That was the majority of the audio that we listened to. We didn't really hear any other drivers. We didn't hear Colapinto. We didn't hear many of the others.
I don't think we even heard George after he went into that little...
There was a little bit of a discussion, but certainly not the initial frustration at going into the barriers, which he did in FP2 and lost the front wing. So, yeah, we'll come on to that now.
Yeah, it does bring us nicely on to free practice. George losing it in FP2. I don't think that's much of an issue, is it? Lewis, though, said he was lost with the setup of the Mercedes. They weren't particularly quick And talking of not particularly quick, talking of Max Verstappen,
Yeah.
15th in FP2.
Yeah. Christian Horner said they couldn't get the tyres working. We came into this weekend thinking that it was going to be a tough one for Red Bull, and it's shaping up that way. The pressure is beginning to mount. Every single race that goes by, the pressure is ramping up. They've seen Sergio Perez's form come back a little bit. He didn't do too bad in FP2 today, but obviously had the crash last weekend in Baku when he was competing for a podium finish. But Max is just out of the running, and he just seems a little bit lost, and ultimately probably a little bit frustrated. He's already been ticked off by the FIA for swearing. Now he's got to watch his lip while also going through this frustration as well. And
there it comes. We've been waiting for the rain today. It has arrived, so we will carry on. I think it's fair on Max though. Red Bull's probably the most difficult race of a dominant season last year was here.
Yeah.
So they've got form here for not being able to do the job.
Yeah. It's the one which they missed out on, wasn't it? Carlos Sainz winning here last year, and that was the one they missed. Look, people will look at it and say that they're a team, which have obviously been destabilised by what happened at the start of the year. Adrian Newey's departure, Jonathan Wheatley going. It's very easy to say that Red Bull on the decline. We won't know until a couple of months down the line, but ultimately now it's how they fix this, and the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to fix. When you're at the top winning races as dominant as they were, that makes it incredibly easier, believe it or not, to sustain that level. But now what we've seen is obviously McLaren make progress, Ferrari too, and Mercedes as well. So, they've kind of leapfrogged Red Bull where they are now. So it's about how Red Bull respond and how they're able to get back to the top and keep everyone happy again.
And well, interestingly, Lando Norris said Ferrari are their main contenders for the Constructors' Championship. You look at those results from FP1 and 2, it would bear fruit in the sense that Leclerc and Sainz were 1 and 3 in FP1 and Norris was in a Ferrari sandwich.
Yeah.
FP2, Norris sets the pace with the 2 Ferraris behind him. So it is at the moment, they are the 2 fastest teams, and they've both got drivers capable of scoring quite heavy points, haven't they?
I think that's great. The fact we've got all these different teams and drivers in the mix, it's not just one person anymore, and that's exactly what Formula One needed this season. After last year, you take your hat off to Red Bull, what they did, and Max Verstappen especially was really super impressive. But now we've got this competitive element, which is what we've been wanting for donkey's years. So, we're enjoying it. Let's hope it continues. We've got the rule change coming up. Hope that doesn't change too much.
I think it's also worth touching on, we talk about the rules, that McLaren, obviously they've been told they need to change their rear wing, their mini DRS if you like, that we saw in Baku. A lot of the teams were unhappy about it. McLaren said we've done nothing wrong, and also that they weren't the only team to be doing this, but the FIA have said no, we need you to make the change. How much will that impact on this weekend? Will it at all, I guess? It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Well, I think this last sort of 20 months has been a very big learning curve for McLaren in terms of experiencing what it's like to have 2 drivers fighting for wins and dealing with that pressure, maintaining the harmony within that driver pairing. But this is an element that's out of their control. This is other teams mudslinging in their direction. Now they've got to be able to cope with that, and I think it's another test, it's another part of their evolution, and for me, like how they respond to this and the pressure from the other teams is going to be really interesting. They've said that they comply with all the tests. As far as they're concerned, they've done nothing wrong, but will that stop the mudslinging? Probably not.
Not at all. Well, we hope not anyway, don't we? That's what Formula One is all about at the end of the day. Join us back here tomorrow when hopefully it won't be raining, but we'll also have had free patches 3, we'll have had qualifying. Who knows, we might have even had some more Max Verstappen swearing. But until then, goodbye everyone.
Cheers, we're off for a ride on the big wheel.